your body of work seems to be, it leans toward people that are in the pop culture lane, like Whitney and Eileen Wernos. You were the last person to speak to her. What was it about Brian Jones when you met him at 14 years old on that train
Mm.
that made you want to do a documentary on him 60 years later?
Well, I think it was a sort of seminal moment for me. I was, 14 in my little flannel outfit going back to school. And the Stones represented everything we kind of wanted, which was they were anti authority. They did terrible things that we all wanted to do. Um, all the girls loved them. And they, although their hair actually looks very short now when we look at it, it was outrageously long then. And, you just had to mention their names, and every parent in the room would scowl and say dreadful things. So they were our heroes. And seeing him just sitting all by himself in his first class railway carriage was, I couldn't really believe it. And then when I asked him for his autograph, uh, which was really just an excuse to get in there, he then sort of said, sit down, what would and he mainly wanted to talk about being a railway enthusiast, being a train spotter, which you really don't expect from your rock star. That he wants to be. And he had a train set until in his 20s. He and Stu, who used to drive them all around in the van, they used to go and collect stuff for his railway set when they were on tour, which you really don't expect either. So he was, a strange mixture of things, I think. And I was pretty amazed by him. And then even more disturbed, I think, when, 6 years later, he was dead. And he was somebody who seemed to have, the world at his feet, really. Everything we all wanted.
Yeah, I think our fascination, people that are normal people, our fascination with celebrity, rock stars, movie stars, TV stars, we think that they have this life that's perfect, that's not um angst, or doesn't, they don't have any problems, like they wake up and it's just a golden life from the moment
Mm.
they open their eyes to the time they go to sleep. And we don't realize that that type of life comes with a certain set of challenges that most people don't have to deal with. Speaking of which, Brian's challenges were the fact that I did not know until I watched your doc his contributions to Painted Black, his contribution
Mm.
to Satisfaction, and his contribution to Ruby Tuesday. I had no idea. Why do
Mm.
you think that that's been, and people may know in the UK, but here in the States, well, I didn't know that. And I'm a I'm a huge music head. So I was like,
Mm.
it's happening right now that I don't know that. Why do you think that there was such, it seems like there was great lengths to make sure that we didn't know that, because we always think that it was Mick Jagger and Keith Richards that did those songs completely, and now we find out that that's not necessarily the case.
Well, maybe there's been a bit of rewriting history, And of course, Brian died so young, and he wasn't the most popular member of the band, I think, when he left. But he was the guy who formed the band, who was the most musically accomplished when they were all put together. And he was somebody who just loved musical instruments. I mean, he could go into a room and pick up a recorder, or pick up a harpsichord, or not pick a harpsichord up, but play a harpsichord, and be completely conversant with it within a few minutes, and would delight in playing odd instruments. Like when he played with the Beatles, they thought he was going to bring his guitar along on that track, My Name, and he brought a saxophone, and they were all like, "What? What are we going to do with a saxophone?" And then, of course, they were so brilliant, they thought of My Name. But I think Brian had that ability. Like in Paint It Black, he put that amazing guitar, sort of almost Eastern weird guitar music in, or Ruby Tuesday again with the it was just a little recorder he was using. So he had that kind of genius. He didn't, though, have the genius of being able to write songs, which was what Mick and Keith had. And that's what took over. And that's really, I guess, what the Stones became known for.
Yeah, I found all of that very, very fascinating. I also found this fascinating that a lot of the information was coming from Bill Wyman and
Mm.
diaries and notes that he kept along the way. Is there anything that he shared with you that didn't make it into the doc?
He had a sort of love for Brian, and also he thought Brian was pretty damn difficult. There's, I think they had a terrible touring schedule. They sort of played 360 gigs a year, and they were constantly being this awful van being moved around, and half of them having to sleep the night in the van, and they would get out to a cafe to go and have something to eat, and Brian would say, "Oh, I don't want to eat." And then they'd get back in, and then he'd say, "Oh, I've got to eat now," and that he would just make them crazy by being really difficult, and so Bill had some of those kind of stories, but Bill had a big heart. I think he just felt sorry for Brian, really, that Brian was his own worst enemy sometimes. He was like a kind of like a kid who wanted attention as well as being rather brilliant.
Yeah, I felt like there was a lot of mention throughout the documentary about him being unhappy with his size. I think he was really short or something, and
Right.
he was really paranoid or self-conscious about that, which I think gave him like that Napoleonish kind of complex where he would act out to bring attention to himself. Um, I was just curious. He had a lot of kids.
Yeah.
You know, he was busy. Do we know what happened to any of his kids or what happened to
Yeah,
his?
I mean, I've met a couple of the kids, and I would have put them in the film, except that they had absolutely no relationship with Brian. He did die so young, but he was somebody who was always kind of looking for a family for himself. It's very interesting that the mothers of his girlfriends would always mother him and iron his shirts and make his meals. And, I think he got thrown out of his own home when he was about 17. And he then just looked for another family. And so I don't think he was mentally capable of dealing with having a kid of his own, really.
That's
And this was, you have to remember, it was before actually birth control. It was
right.
before the pill. It was before the pill. Otherwise, it would be very hard to understand what happened.
It was a lot going on with him. I was like, okay, he was really
Yeah.
busy. He was very busy. Um, and just closing it out, I was just curious to know what is it about these types of pop culture-ish people like the Suge Knights, the Sarah Palins, the Brian Joneses that draws you to these subjects and makes you want to get their story out to the masses?
Well, I guess they're kind of historical figures, and they represent something very significant about our time, our history, our time. And I hope as a sort of collection of films, if anyone ever watches them, that they will get a sense of our time, our world, some of the weird and wonderful figures that have been produced by it, and the kind of forces and culture and backgrounds and families and so on that have produced them.
Nick, it has been my pleasure to talk to you today. You gave me some wonderful, wonderful answers. And
You're
for
very kind.
nothing, not for nothing, but I was very impressed that you did a whole thing about the Grim Sleeper because true crime is my thing. And I was like, I couldn't believe that story when I heard about that one. So I was
Yeah.
impressed about that. So I just wanted to say that before we close it out because I was like, oh no, he did the Grim
Well,
Sleeper too.
yeah, that was an amazing experience. Yeah, and I actually made a lot of great friends in Compton, around Compton. So it was actually a great experience doing that film.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I
Thank you.
appreciate you. I really did enjoy this doc. It was very enlightening, and I hope that other people are enlightened and educated when they see it too.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.